Margaret Thompson stepped out of the taxi, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The towering facade of the Manhattan Hotel loomed above her, its glass windows reflecting the bustling energy of New York City. At 72, Margaret had never set foot in such a prestigious establishment, and she felt a thrill at the thought of spending a night in luxury, even if it was just a brief escape from her routine life in Brooklyn. As she approached the entrance, her worn-out shoes scuffed against the polished marble floor. She adjusted her lightweight scarf, trying to conceal the frayed edges of her cardigan. The doorman, a tall man in a sharp suit, barely glanced her way as he held the door open for a group of well-dressed guests. Margaret forced a smile, reminding herself that appearances could be deceiving. After all, she was here to enjoy herself, not to worry about what others thought. Inside the lobby, the air buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the elegantly decorated space. Margaret's eyes darted around, taking in the opulent surroundings, the plush armchairs, the grand piano in the corner, and the rich aroma of fresh coffee wafting from the cafe nearby. She felt a pang of nostalgia, remembering the dreams she had shared with her late husband George of traveling to places like this. "Would you like to check in, ma'am?" A young receptionist interrupted her reverie, her tone professional yet indifferent. Margaret nodded, taking a deep breath as she approached the counter. She handed over her ID and credit card, hoping that the staff would overlook the frayed edges of her attire. "Just a moment," the receptionist replied, tapping away at her keyboard. After a moment, she looked up, her expression shifting to one of mild disapproval. "I'm afraid we have a dress code here and—" Margaret's heart sank. "I understand. I just wanted a little getaway. I thought—" "Perhaps next time, ma'am. I can recommend a lovely place that's more suited for casual attire." The receptionist cut her off, her voice dripping with condescension. Margaret felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. The stark contrast between her appearance and that of the other guests was painfully apparent. "Thank you," Margaret managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned on her heel, feeling the weight of judgment in the air as she walked away. The disappointment gnawed at her, but she refused to cry. Instead, she made her way to the hotel cafe, seeking solace in a cup of coffee. The cafe was bustling with patrons, the sound of laughter and conversation filling the air. Margaret found a small table in the corner, away from the prying eyes of the other guests. She ordered a coffee and a slice of cake, hoping the sweetness would lift her spirits. As she sat there, her gaze drifted to the windows, where the city outside buzzed with life. Moments turned into minutes, and she sipped her coffee slowly, trying to savor the moment. But her thoughts wandered back to George. They had talked about coming to New York, exploring the art scene, and indulging in the finer things life had to offer. Instead, here she was, alone and feeling the sting of rejection. "Margaret, is that you?" A voice snapped her from her thoughts. She looked up to see a woman in her 60s, elegantly dressed, with a warm smile that instantly made her feel at ease. "Linda?" Margaret exclaimed, recognizing her old friend from their book club. They hadn't seen each other in years. "Oh, my dear, it's been ages." Linda pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "What brings you to this fancy place? You look wonderful, by the way." Margaret chuckled softly, the warmth of Linda's presence dispelling some of her earlier discomfort. "I came here for a little getaway, but it seems I misjudged the dress code." Linda frowned, glancing around the cafe. "People can be so judgmental. You know that's their problem, not yours." "Thank you," Margaret replied, feeling a flicker of gratitude for her friend's kindness. "It's just, I thought I could escape for a bit, but I feel more out of place than ever." Linda leaned in, her voice lowering conspiratorially. "Listen, don't let it get to you. You've always been so much more than what you wear. Remember that time we went to that art exhibition? You had such insightful comments about the pieces." Margaret smiled at the memory. They had spent hours discussing the nuances of modern art, and she had felt truly alive during those conversations. "I do remember. I loved that day." "Then hold on to that feeling. Linda encouraged. You deserve this little getaway. Don't let anyone take that from you. Margaret looked into her friend's eyes, seeing the sincerity there. You're right. I suppose I just need to remember who I am, regardless of how I look. The two women chatted for a while longer, reminiscing about their book club days and sharing stories about their lives. Margaret felt a warmth spreading through her, a sense of connection that eased her earlier discomfort. As they spoke, she realized that the world outside didn't define her worth. It was the relationships she cherished and the memories she held dear. After some time, Linda had to leave, promising to catch up again soon. As she walked away, Margaret felt a renewed sense of determination. Perhaps she could still enjoy her time in the hotel, even if it wasn't what she had initially envisioned. She took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the cafe envelop her like a comforting embrace. With her coffee finished and the cake half-eaten, Margaret decided to explore the hotel further. She wandered through the lobby, taking in the art adorning the walls. Each piece told a story, and she found herself lost in thought, imagining the lives of the artists behind them. As she moved toward the grand staircase, she paused to admire a large, abstract painting that seemed to pulse with energy. "What do you think?" a voice asked from beside her. Margaret turned to see a young man, perhaps in his late 20s, with curly hair and a paint-splattered apron. He was holding a sketchbook and looked genuinely curious about her opinion. "I think it's beautiful," she replied, her voice steady. "It captures so much emotion." "Exactly. It's like the artist poured their soul into it," he said enthusiastically. "I'm an artist myself trying to find my voice. What about you?" Margaret hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. "I used to paint a little, but it's been years." "Why don't you start again?" he encouraged. "You never know what you might discover about yourself." Margaret smiled, feeling the spark of inspiration he ignited within her. "Maybe I will." With the sun beginning to set outside, casting a golden hue across the lobby, Margaret felt a shift within her. Perhaps this getaway wasn't just about escaping her routine. It could be the beginning of something new. She straightened her shoulders, ready to embrace whatever came next, even if it meant facing the judgments of others. As she made her way back to her table, she couldn't shake the feeling that this journey was about to unfold in ways she could never have anticipated. With a hopeful heart, she allowed herself to dream once more, imagining the possibilities that lay ahead. Margaret Thompson stood in the lavish lobby of the Manhattan Hotel, clutching her worn leather handbag tightly to her chest. The elegant chandeliers overhead sparkled like diamonds, casting a warm glow on the polished marble floors, while the soft murmur of affluent guests filled the air. Yet in the midst of this opulence, Margaret felt like a ghost, invisible and unwanted. The hotel manager, a tall man with slicked-back hair and a pinched expression, approached her with a determined stride, his polished shoes clicking sharply against the floor. "Excuse me, madam," he said, his voice laced with authority. "I need to ask you to leave the premises immediately." Margaret's heart sank as she looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What do you mean?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "I'm just trying to enjoy a moment here." "The hotel has a strict dress code," he replied, his tone unyielding. "You cannot remain here looking like that." He gestured dismissively at her faded cardigan and the comfortable slacks that had seen better days. Hurt and humiliated, Margaret felt the heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm not causing any trouble," she protested, her voice barely above a whisper. The manager's lips tightened into a thin line. "I'm sorry, but we cannot have guests who do not meet our standards." Around them, other guests turned their heads, some with expressions of pity, while others looked on with disdain, as if she were an unsightly stain on the hotel's otherwise pristine reputation. Margaret felt the weight of their judgment, the sting of their gazes wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. With trembling hands, she began to gather her meager belongings, each item a reminder of her struggles. As she stuffed the small, frayed notebook she always carried into her handbag, a voice broke through the haze of her humiliation. "Hey, wait!" Margaret looked up to see a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, with bright blue hair and paint-splattered clothes approaching her. The artist's eyes sparkled with warmth, a stark contrast to the coldness of the hotel's atmosphere. "Don't let them get to you," she said gently, a comforting smile spreading across her face. "I've been there. Sometimes people just can't see beyond appearances." Margaret paused, her heart fluttering at the unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just, I thought I could have a little peace here." The young woman stepped closer, her expression earnest. "You deserve peace no matter what you wear. My name's Lily, by the way. I'm an artist. I know how hard it is to feel invisible in a world that values only the shiny and new." "Margaret," she introduced herself, a flicker of hope igniting within her. "I appreciate your words, really." As Margaret took a deep breath, she noticed the other guests still watching her, some with pity in their eyes, others whispering behind their hands. With each glance, the humiliation deepened, but Lily's presence offered a small comfort. "Come on," Lily said, her tone growing more animated. "Let's get out of this place. I know a cafe nearby that serves the best coffee. It's a little more down to earth." Margaret hesitated, glancing back at the opulent lobby, a place she had thought would offer her solace. But with the weight of the manager's words still heavy on her heart, she nodded. "All right, I could use a good cup of coffee." With that, the two women made their way out of the hotel, Margaret casting one last glance over her shoulder. The lobby felt like a world away as they stepped into the bustling streets of New York City. The cacophony of honking cars, the chatter of pedestrians, and the vibrant energy of the city enveloped her, washing away some of the sting from her earlier encounter. They walked side by side, the cool air refreshing against Margaret's skin. Lily led the way, her enthusiasm infectious as she pointed out the various art galleries and quirky shops lining the streets. "You know, being an artist isn't just about talent, it's about finding your voice," she said, her blue hair bouncing with every step. "I've learned that the hard way." Margaret listened intently, intrigued by this young woman's passion. "How did you find your voice?" she asked, genuinely curious. Lily turned to her, her expression contemplative. "I used to care too much about what others thought. I tried to fit into their mold, to create art that would please everyone else. But it wasn't until I embraced my own style, my quirks, that I truly found myself. It's liberating, really." Margaret smiled softly, feeling a connection form between them. "I've spent so many years trying to please others, too. It's exhausting." "Exactly!" Lily exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "You're never going to make everyone happy, but you can make yourself happy, and that's what matters. You're a work of art, Margaret. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As they reached the cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, wrapping around them like a warm embrace. Margaret's spirits lifted slightly, the chaos of the hotel behind her. They found a small table by the window, and Margaret took a moment to savor the view of the bustling street outside. Over steaming cups of coffee, the conversation flowed easily. Lily shared stories of her artistic journey, the struggles she faced, and the moments of triumph that made it all worthwhile. In return, Margaret opened up about her late husband, their dreams, and the way life had shifted dramatically after his passing. "It's like I'm lost," Margaret confessed, her voice wavering. "I thought I had my path laid out, but now I don't even know who I am." Lily leaned in, her expression earnest. "You're still you, Margaret. Just because life has thrown you off course doesn't mean you can't find your way back. Sometimes it takes a little detour to discover the real you." The words resonated deeply within Margaret, igniting a flicker of hope that had long been dimmed. "Maybe you're right," she said, her voice stronger now. "Maybe this is the beginning of something new." With each passing moment, the weight of her earlier humiliation began to lift, replaced by a budding sense of resilience. As they finished their coffee, Margaret felt a renewed determination stirring within her. Perhaps this unexpected encounter with Lily was the turning point she needed, a reminder that she was still capable of creating her own story, no matter the obstacles in her path. As they stepped back onto the bustling streets, Margaret looked up at the towering buildings, the sky a brilliant blue above. For the first time in a while, she felt a sense of possibility blossoming within her, a realization that her journey was far from over. With Lily by her side, she could begin to reclaim her voice and embrace the art of living, one brushstroke at a time. Margaret Thompson wandered the bustling streets of New York City, her heart heavy with the weight of recent events. The cacophony of honking horns and chattering pedestrians was a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped her thoughts. She felt like a ghost drifting through a world that had suddenly become foreign. The vibrant city that had once promised adventure and possibility now felt suffocating, each step echoing the injustice she had just faced at the hotel. As she walked, she observed the myriad of lives unfolding around her. A young couple laughed together, their hands entwined, while a businessman rushed past, engrossed in his phone. Margaret clutched her worn handbag tightly, feeling a pang of envy for their carefree existence. She had once dreamed of such moments, but they felt like distant memories, overshadowed by the shame of her expulsion. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was an outsider, discarded and forgotten. Eventually, she sought refuge in a small community center nestled between towering skyscrapers. The building was modest, a stark contrast to the opulence of the hotel she had just been ejected from. As she stepped inside, the warmth of the space enveloped her, and the sounds of laughter and conversation filled the air. A bulletin board adorned with colorful flyers caught her eye, announcing various classes and events. Her heart quickened as she read about an art class scheduled for the following week. "Excuse me, dear," a voice interrupted her thoughts. Margaret turned to find a woman in her 60s, her gray hair pulled back into a neat bun. The woman's eyes sparkled with kindness. "Are you new here?" Margaret smiled hesitantly. "Yes, I'm looking for a place to belong." "You've come to the right place," the woman replied, extending her hand. "I'm Doris. We have an art group that meets every Wednesday. It's a wonderful way to express yourself and meet people. You should join us." Margaret hesitated for a moment, the specter of her recent humiliation creeping back into her mind. "I don't know if I'm good enough," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Doris placed a reassuring hand on Margaret's arm. "It's not about being good enough. It's about finding joy in the process. Come, give it a try. You might surprise yourself." With a deep breath, Margaret nodded. The warmth of Doris's encouragement ignited a flicker of hope within her. Perhaps this was the fresh start she needed, a chance to explore her creativity and connect with others who understood the struggles of life. As the days passed, Margaret attended her first art class, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The room was filled with women of various ages, each absorbed in their own projects. The scent of paint and turpentine wafted through the air, and the sound of brushes gliding across canvas created a soothing backdrop. "Welcome, everyone," their instructor, a passionate artist named Carla, announced. "Today, we're going to explore the theme of resilience through color. I want you all to paint your emotions, whatever they may be." Margaret picked up a brush, the wooden handle feeling foreign in her grip. She hesitated, staring at the blank canvas in front of her. What could she possibly express? But as she dipped the brush into vibrant hues of blue and green, memories flooded her mind. Her late husband's laughter, their dreams, the love they had shared. She painted with fervor, the strokes becoming more confident as each layer of color emerged. "Beautiful, Margaret," Carla exclaimed, walking by her easel. "You have a wonderful sense of color." Margaret's heart swelled with pride at the compliment. "Thank you," she replied, her voice gaining strength. "I never thought I could do this." As the class continued, Margaret engaged in conversations with the other women. They shared their stories, tales of heartbreak, loss, and resilience. Each narrative resonated with Margaret, weaving an intricate tapestry of shared experiences. She felt an overwhelming sense of belonging as they listened to one another, offering support and understanding. One afternoon, a woman named Ruth, a retired schoolteacher with a warm smile, leaned over to Margaret as they painted. "You know, we all have our struggles, but it's how we rise from them that defines us," Ruth said, her hands deftly working on a canvas filled with vibrant flowers. Art allows us to express the beauty and pain of our journeys. Margaret nodded, feeling the truth of Ruth's words sink deep within her. She began to see her own life not just as a series of disappointments, but as a rich tapestry of experiences that had led her to this moment. After several weeks in the class, Margaret found herself transforming. She became bolder with her brushstrokes, pouring her emotions onto the canvas. The vibrant colors mirrored her newfound sense of self-worth, and she discovered a hidden talent for capturing the essence of her memories. Each painting became a reflection of her journey, a visual diary of her resilience. One day, as the women gathered for their class, Doris announced an upcoming exhibition at the community center. "We're going to showcase our work next month," she exclaimed, her excitement infectious. "It's a chance for us to share our stories with the world." Margaret's heart raced at the thought. Would she have the courage to display her art? The idea of exposing her emotions to others filled her with both dread and exhilaration. As she contemplated the possibility, she felt a surge of determination. This was her opportunity to reclaim her voice, to show the world that she was more than just an old woman in tattered clothes. "Margaret, you should definitely participate," Carla encouraged, noticing the spark of hesitation in her eyes. "Your work is powerful. You have a unique perspective that deserves to be shared." Margaret took a deep breath, looking around at the supportive faces of the women in the room. They had all faced their battles, and yet here they were, ready to share their triumphs. She realized that this was not just about her art. It was about standing alongside these incredible women, each with their own stories of resilience. "I'll do it," Margaret declared, her voice steady and strong. "I want to participate in the exhibition." The room erupted in cheers, and Margaret felt a rush of warmth at their support. In that moment, she understood that she was not alone in her struggles. With every brush stroke, she had begun to reclaim her identity, and now she was ready to take the next step in her journey. As she left the community center that day, Margaret glanced back at the building, a smile spreading across her face. The transformation within her had begun, fueled by the love and encouragement of those around her. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to not only embrace her past, but to create a future filled with color and possibility. With each step she took through the streets of New York, she carried with her the stories of the women who had inspired her, ready to share her own story with the world. Margaret Thompson stood in front of her easel, the vibrant colors of her paints blending together as she attempted to capture the cacophony of emotions swirling inside her. The small community center felt like a cocoon, a safe haven far removed from the judgmental glances of hotel guests and the stifling confines of her former life. After joining the art class, she had discovered an unexpected joy in painting, a passion that had lain dormant for far too long. "Margaret, that's beautiful!" Lily's voice rang out, filled with genuine admiration. The young artist was perched on a stool across the room, her own canvas splattered with an explosion of colors. "You're really capturing the light in that piece." Margaret turned to Lily, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, dear. I'm just trying to express what I feel. It's a bit nerve-wracking, though." She glanced down at her canvas, a swirl of blues and yellows that reflected her mixed emotions, her struggles, her dreams, and the faint hope that flickered within her. "You're doing great," Lily reassured her, setting down her brush and walking over. "You should think about showing your work at that local gallery I told you about. They're looking for new artists, and your style is so unique." Margaret's stomach twisted at the thought. "Oh, I don't know, Lily. What if nobody likes it? What if they laugh?" The insecurities bubbled up like a pot about to boil over. The humiliation of her expulsion from the hotel still lingered, and the idea of putting herself out there again felt like standing on the edge of a precipice. Lily placed a comforting hand on Margaret's shoulder. "It's not about what others think. It's about expressing yourself. You've come so far since we met. Remember how you felt when you first picked up a brush?" Margaret nodded slowly, memories of vibrant colors and unrestrained creativity flooding back. "I felt free," she admitted, a smile breaking through the clouds of doubt. "But this is different. This is exposing myself." Exactly. It's exposing yourself, and that's brave. You've already faced so much. You can do this. Lily's enthusiasm was infectious, and Margaret found herself drawn to the idea despite her reservations. That night, Margaret lay in bed, the weight of her fears pressing down like a heavy blanket. She thought about the gallery, about the chance to share her work with the world. What if it was her moment to shine, to reclaim a part of herself that had been buried beneath layers of regret? But the shadows of doubt crept in, whispering insidious thoughts. Who was she to think her art mattered? As days turned into weeks, Margaret continued to paint, pouring her heart into every stroke of the brush. Each piece became a window into her soul, a way to articulate the emotions she had struggled to voice for so long. Still, the fear of showcasing her work loomed large, casting a shadow over her newfound passion. One afternoon, after class, Margaret found herself sitting alone at a small cafe near the community center. The sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the pages of her sketchbook as she absent-mindedly doodled. The clatter of cups and the hum of conversation created a comforting backdrop, but her mind was elsewhere, tangled in thoughts of self-doubt. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" A soft voice interrupted her reverie. Margaret looked up to see a woman in her 30s, her hair a messy bun atop her head and a paint-splattered apron tied around her waist. "No, please, go ahead," Margaret replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "I'm Jenna," the woman said, settling in with a grateful smile. "I saw you painting at the community center. Your work is incredible." Margaret felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Thank you. I'm still learning." "Learning?" Jenna chuckled lightly. "You're being humble. You have a real gift. I've been painting for years, and I'd kill for that kind of talent." Margaret couldn't help but smile, finding comfort in the compliment. "I appreciate that, but I'm still working through a lot of insecurities. It's hard to put yourself out there." "I get it. I felt the same way before my first gallery show. I was terrified, but I realized that my art was a part of me, and if I didn't share it, I was doing myself a disservice." Jenna's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "You've got to share your voice with the world. You never know who it might touch." Margaret considered Jenna's words, her heart warming at the thought of her art reaching someone, anyone. "Maybe you're right. I've been thinking about showing my work at a local gallery." "Then you absolutely should. I can help you prepare if you'd like. It's all about finding the right presentation. I have some tips that might help." Jenna leaned forward, her passion contagious. With newfound determination, Margaret nodded. "I would love that. Thank you, Jenna." Over the next few weeks, the unlikely friendship blossomed between the two women. They would meet at the cafe, sharing ideas and brainstorming how to present Margaret's work. Jenna's supportive nature and experience in the art world began to chip away at Margaret's insecurities, filling her with a sense of possibility she hadn't felt in years. But as excitement built, so did the shadows of her financial struggles. Margaret's meager savings were dwindling, and the thought of paying for art supplies and potential gallery fees nagged at her. She often found herself staring at her bank statement, the numbers taunting her. "I can't let this dream slip away," she whispered to herself one bleak evening, feeling the weight of her situation pressing down on her. One afternoon, as she was painting, a knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Startled, she wiped her hands on a rag and opened the door to find Lily standing there, a bright smile on her face and a bouquet of wildflowers in her hands. "Surprise!" Lily exclaimed. "I thought you could use a little pick-me-up. How are the paintings coming along?" Margaret's heart warmed at the sight of her friend. "They're coming along. I've been working hard, but I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed." Lily stepped inside, setting the flowers on the table. "Why don't you show me what you've got?" Margaret hesitated, but then nodded, leading Lily to her easel. The colors danced on the canvas, vibrant and full of life. As Margaret explained her thought process behind each piece, she felt the weight of her worries lift slightly. "You're incredible, Margaret. This is so powerful," Lily said, her eyes wide with admiration. "You're really capturing something special here." "Thank you, Lily. It means a lot coming from you." Margaret's heart fluttered at the affirmation. "Have you thought more about showcasing this art?" Lily asked, her voice hopeful. I have, Margaret admitted, but I'm worried about the costs. I don't have much left. Lily's expression softened. What if I help you with that? I can pitch in for the supplies if it means you'll share your work. You deserve this chance. Margaret's eyes widened in disbelief. No, I couldn't ask you to do that. It's too much. Consider it an investment in your talent, Lily insisted. You've inspired me so much already. Let me be part of this journey with you. Tears pricked at the corners of Margaret's eyes. You are such a blessing in my life, Lily. I don't know what I'd do without you. As they hugged, Margaret felt a sense of hope blooming within her, nourished by the encouragement of her friends. Perhaps this was her moment to step out of the shadows, to embrace the possibility of a future filled with art and self-expression. In the days that followed, Margaret immersed herself in her creations, fueled by the support of Lily and Jenna. She began to sketch out her ideas for the gallery, experimenting with different styles and themes. Each brushstroke became a part of her journey, a testament to her resilience and determination. But even as her art flourished, the specter of her past loomed large in the background, a reminder of the prejudice she had faced and the financial struggles that still haunted her. With every piece she painted, she wrestled with her self-doubt, questioning whether she truly had the right to call herself an artist. Yet deep down, a spark of defiance ignited within her. Margaret Thompson was more than her shabby clothes and the hurtful dismissal she had faced. She was a woman with a story, a voice longing to be heard. And with the support of Lily, Jenna, and the community that had welcomed her, she was ready to take the next step into the unknown. The day of the gallery showcase approached, and Margaret found herself oscillating between excitement and anxiety. The thought of standing in front of a crowd, sharing her art and her story, was both exhilarating and terrifying. But as she painted late into the night, she reminded herself that this was her moment, a chance to reclaim her narrative and inspire others through her journey. With each stroke, Margaret transformed her fears into colors on the canvas, a vivid representation of the life she had lived and the hopes she dared to dream. The journey had just begun, and she was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The night of the gallery opening arrived with a vibrancy that hung in the air, electric and pregnant with possibility. Margaret Thompson stood before her collection of paintings, heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The small art gallery, nestled in the heart of Brooklyn, buzzed with anticipation. Guests mingled, their laughter and chatter creating a warm cocoon around her, yet Margaret felt the chill of anxiety creeping in. Would they see her? Would they understand? Lily, her newfound friend and unwavering supporter, stood by her side, adjusting the collar of Margaret's simple but elegant blouse. "You look beautiful, Margaret, just like your art," she assured her, her voice a soothing balm against Margaret's mounting nerves. "Do you really think so?" Margaret asked, her eyes scanning the room. She could hardly believe she was here, surrounded by people who had come to see her work. "What if they think it's all terrible?" "They won't," Lily replied confidently. "You've poured your heart into these pieces. They'll see that. Just remember, this is your moment. Embrace it." Margaret took a deep breath, letting the warmth of Lily's encouragement seep into her. She had spent countless nights painting, each stroke of the brush a release of the emotions pent up inside her since her expulsion from the hotel. The colors on the canvas mirrored her journey, vivid reds for the anger, soft blues for her sorrow, and bright yellows for the hope that had begun to blossom within her. She had transformed her pain into art, and now the world would finally see it. As the clock struck 6, the gallery owner, a charismatic man named Felix, stepped up to the small microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming and confident, "thank you for joining us this evening for the unveiling of Margaret Thompson's debut collection, Rebirth. Each piece tells a story of resilience, strength, and the transformative power of art." Margaret felt her heart flutter in her chest as she stepped forward. The murmurs of the crowd faded into silence, all eyes turning toward her. She had expected fear to grip her, but instead, a wave of determination washed over her. This was her chance to share not just her art, but her truth. "Thank you, Felix," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "When I first picked up a paintbrush, I was at a low point in my life. Many of you may not know my story, but I was unjustly expelled from a hotel in Manhattan simply because of my appearance." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle in the room. It was a humiliating experience, one that made me feel invisible and unwanted. A ripple of understanding passed through the audience, and Margaret continued. "But in that moment of despair, I found a spark of hope. I discovered a community of women who embraced me, who showed me that my worth was not defined by my clothes or my past. They taught me to express my feelings through art, and I began to paint." As she spoke, she gestured to the paintings that adorned the walls, vibrant canvases filled with swirling colors and deep emotions. "Each piece represents a part of my journey, the struggles, the pain, and ultimately the triumph. This one," she said, pointing to a large canvas splashed with fiery reds and oranges, "is titled Embers of Anger. It captures the rage I felt when I was thrown out, the unfairness of it all." Margaret noticed a woman in the front row nodding, her eyes glistening with tears. She felt a connection to this stranger, as if they shared a bond forged in the fires of hardship. "And this piece," she continued, moving to another canvas that shimmered with soft blues and greens, "is called Finding Serenity. It represents my journey toward self-acceptance and healing." The audience listened intently, captivated by her story. Margaret felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins as she unveiled more of her truth. "Art has the power to heal, to give voice to those who feel voiceless. I stand here today not just as an artist, but as a woman who has reclaimed her narrative." Suddenly, a rustle in the crowd caught her attention. A familiar face emerged from the throng, a former hotel guest who had witnessed her expulsion. The woman's eyes widened in recognition, and she stepped forward, a mix of empathy and remorse etched on her features. "Margaret," she said softly, her voice barely rising above the buzz of the gallery. "I remember you. I'm so sorry for what happened. I wanted to say something that day, but I didn't have the courage." Margaret's heart raced. This was the woman who had looked on with pity as she gathered her belongings, and now she stood before her, vulnerability painted across her face. "It's okay," Margaret replied, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. "It was a painful experience, but it has brought me to where I am now." The woman's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Your art is beautiful. You've turned your pain into something incredible." Margaret felt a swell of gratitude. "Thank you. It means a lot to me to hear that. I believe we all have our stories, our struggles. It's how we choose to rise above them that defines us." The audience, now deeply engrossed in her narrative, began to applaud. The sound swelled around her, wrapping her in a cocoon of acceptance and validation. She had transformed her shame into strength, and in doing so, she had inspired others to confront their own struggles. As the applause faded, Margaret looked around the gallery, her heart swelling with pride. She had faced her fears, and in sharing her story, she had connected with others in a way she had never anticipated. The journey she had embarked upon had not just been about finding herself through art. It had become a bridge to understanding and empathy among strangers. Lily rushed to her side, beaming with pride. "You were amazing! You touched so many hearts tonight," she exclaimed, pulling Margaret into a warm embrace. Margaret smiled, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. "I never imagined I'd find this kind of connection. It feels like I finally found my voice." "Because you have," Lily replied. "And this is just the beginning." As the evening progressed, Margaret mingled with guests, sharing her experiences and listening to their stories. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a realization that her journey was not just about her, but about the community she had found, and the bonds that were formed through shared struggles. In that moment, Margaret understood the profound truth of her journey, that every hurt, every humiliation, and every moment of despair could lead to something beautiful if she chose to embrace it. And as she stood amidst the vibrant energy of the gallery, surrounded by people who saw her for who she truly was, she knew that she was no longer just a woman cast aside. She was an artist, a storyteller, and a beacon of hope for others who had faced their own battles. As the sun dipped below the New York skyline, casting a golden hue over the bustling streets, Margaret Thompson stood in her modest apartment, the walls adorned with her vibrant paintings. Each canvas told a story of resilience, a reflection of her journey from despair to hope. Yet, despite the newfound recognition her art was receiving, a storm brewed within her, fueled by the unsettling return of an enigmatic figure from her past. It was early evening when the doorbell rang, a sound that echoed through the otherwise quiet space. Margaret's heart raced. The last thing she expected was a visitor. She opened the door to find a tall man with graying hair, dressed in a tailored suit that seemed out of place in her humble setting. His piercing blue eyes were a mirror of the past she had tried to leave behind. "Margaret," he greeted, his voice smooth yet tinged with an unsettling familiarity. "It's been a long time." "Edward," she breathed, the name slipping from her lips like a whisper of forgotten memories. Edward Fletcher, her husband's business partner, a man who had always lingered in the shadows of their lives. She hadn't seen him since the funeral, and his sudden reappearance sent a chill down her spine. "May I come in?" he asked, his demeanor polite but assertive. Margaret hesitated, her instincts warning her against allowing him into her sanctuary. But curiosity and a sense of unfinished business compelled her to step aside and let him in. As he entered, she noticed the way he surveyed her apartment, his sharp gaze scanning the walls, the art that had become her lifeblood. "I see you've taken up painting," he said, his tone devoid of warmth. "It's quite colorful." "Art has become a big part of my life," she replied, crossing her arms defensively. "What do you want, Edward?" He leaned against the wall, exuding an air of nonchalance that belied the tension in the room. "I came to talk about your husband and the hotel." Margaret's heart sank at the mention of the hotel, the place where her dreams had crumbled. "What about it?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Things aren't what they seem, Margaret. There's a lot you don't know about what happened after you were expelled." "What do you mean?" she snapped, her patience wearing thin. Edward took a deep breath, as if bracing himself for the weight of his words. "Your husband had a hidden fortune, a substantial amount of money tied up in the hotel's management. I suspect they orchestrated your expulsion to keep you out of the picture." Margaret felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "That's absurd. Why would they do that?" "Because," he continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "they feared you would claim your rightful share. Your husband had plans, Margaret, plans that involved you." "Stop it!" she shouted, anger surging through her. "You're lying!" "I wish I were," he said, his expression unyielding. "I found documents after his death. Contracts, agreements. He was preparing to leave the hotel and its management behind. He wanted a fresh start for both of you." Margaret's mind raced, piecing together fragments of conversations with her late husband. They had always dreamed of a life beyond their modest means, a life filled with art and adventure. "Why didn't he tell me?" she questioned, a mix of hurt and confusion flooding her heart. "Because he was trying to protect you," Edward replied, his tone softening. "He thought you would be safer if you didn't know. But now, with you gaining attention for your art, they've likely realized you could become a threat to their control." Margaret felt as if she were tumbling down a rabbit hole, each revelation pulling her deeper into a world she thought she had left behind. "So, what do you want from me?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. "I want to help you," Edward said, his eyes locking onto hers. "You have a chance to reclaim what is rightfully yours. All you need to do is confront the hotel management and demand transparency. You deserve to know the truth about your husband's legacy." Margaret's heart pounded in her chest. The idea of confronting the very people who had humiliated her was daunting, yet the thought of reclaiming her husband's legacy ignited a fire within her. "And you think they'll just hand it over?" she challenged, skepticism lacing her words. "I can help you navigate the situation," Edward promised. "You're an artist now, and your voice carries weight. Use it." "Why should I trust you?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "You've always been shadowy, lurking in the background." "Because I owe it to your husband," he replied, a hint of vulnerability breaking through his composed facade. He was a good man, and he believed in you. I want to honor that. Silence enveloped the room as Margaret weighed his words. Trust was a fragile thing, and she had learned the hard way how easily it could be shattered. But the prospect of uncovering the truth about her husband, about their life together, was too compelling to ignore. "What do I have to do?" she finally asked, her voice steadier now. Edward smiled, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "First, we need to gather evidence. I have some documents, but I'll need your assistance to connect the dots. We can work together to expose the truth." Margaret nodded slowly, determination settling in her chest. "All right," she said. "But if this is a trick—" "It's not," he interrupted, his tone sincere. "I promise you, Margaret, we'll get to the bottom of this together." As Edward laid out his plan, Margaret felt a surge of empowerment coursing through her veins. The shadows of her past were shifting, revealing paths she had never considered. She was no longer just a woman cast aside. She was a force to be reckoned with, ready to reclaim her voice and her destiny. That night, as Margaret prepared for bed, she glanced at her paintings, each one a testament to her struggles and triumphs. With newfound resolve, she whispered to herself, "I will not be a victim of my past any longer." The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. In the heart of New York City, amidst the chaos and uncertainty, Margaret Thompson was reborn, a woman ready to confront her past and uncover the truth.